representatives from the important public services that we need to work with us on this. And then, again, I'm really encouraged by the high level of seniority of the people from those organisations, from police, health, education, and so on, our local authorities, who are joining us from the important public services that we need to work with us on this. And again, I'm really encouraged by the committed to helping us with what is going to be a very challenging process of implementation. One of the things that we want to do is to establish a panel of victims and survivors to work alongside the board. And for that reason, we had attending our meeting, Jennifer Jackson and Geraldine Bilston, who chair the Victim and Survivors Advisory Council in Victoria, Australia. They've been working very closely with my team in developing the strategy. We've learned a lot from them, and we're going to keep in touch with them and attend some of their meetings as well, so we can learn more about how to do that well, how to establish a panel of victims and survivors and use their experience well. The board started to look at priorities because it's a 10-year strategy. There's a lot of commitments. We have to pace those whilst wanting to implement at pace. We have to prioritise those we're going to work on first. So the board did some work in small groups on that, and we're going to formulate those proposals and bring them forward. And then the other item that we took at this meeting was to brief the board members on one of the important pillars of the strategy, which is the sustained public engagement programme to raise the issue of gender-based violence, and particularly violence against girls and women. This is going to be sustained over at least a year. It's not something that we're just going to put out there and then not return to. We want to raise this issue and stimulate conversations amongst the public and groups in the public about this issue, because fundamentally the strategy won't achieve its aims unless it starts to change attitudes and culture around violence against girls and women. The first step in that public engagement programme is a campaign that the Mayor is going to lead himself, directed at stimulating that conversation with men and boys and asking the question, is what happens to women and girls okay? And we've developed a video that's going to kind of spearhead that campaign, and I think we're going to show you that at some point during this press conference for you to promote for us, I hope, as we go forward. So I'm going to hand over now to the Mayor to talk about that element of the campaign. Andy.
Thanks so much, Bev. Good afternoon, everybody. Just to thank you, Bev, for the incredible work you've done to bring us to this point, because we've got a very strong strategy and, as you say, a very engaged board who met for the first time this morning. When I spoke to them, when I attended the start of the meeting, I said, looking back here on 2020, I believe last year we saw a watershed in the public debate about racial violence and racial discrimination. And 12 months on from now, I want to be looking back at 2021 as a watershed in the public debate about gender-based violence, particularly violence and abuse aimed at women and girls. And that's what this board is all about. It's about moving from gestures and words to deeds and actions, tangible deeds and actions. We do need to change policing, and you and I are on with that. A very different experience for victims when they come forward to Greater Manchester Police. We do need to learn from past mistakes, and we will in the new year bring forward the latest report on child sexual exploitation in Greater Manchester with the report on Oldham. We need to change transport and make it a much safer environment for people travelling at night. But again, making sure that women and girls feel safe using public transport and know how to report things. We need to change our communities, make them feel safer. But as you rightly said, Bev, none of that will work unless we also take on the underlying culture. And that actually almost comes first. And it's right that the board started with that. Change culture, change attitudes, and change behaviours. And it's why I did make a commitment earlier that makes people feel uncomfortable or even worse, unsafe. And it's that we've got to have a conversation about. And obviously I'm in a position where I can lead that conversation, and that's exactly what we want to do. You know, I want to get the message over to men and boys in Greater Manchester. We all have mothers, grandmothers, sisters, nieces, daughters, and we have to ask ourselves if we would not like any of our own family spoken at in this way or treated in this way, why should we accept it for anyone else's? And it's about having a conversation that perhaps we've never properly had before, and asking each other and ourselves, is this okay? And in many instances, I hope, well, I feel certain the vast majority of decent men and boys will say, no, it's not actually. And it's time to challenge it, reflect on our own behaviour, but also call out each other where we know that the behaviour of people around us is just simply not acceptable and shouldn't be tolerated anymore. So this is what the video is about that Bev mentioned. This is a high-profile campaign that I said I would lead, and I will lead it in 2022. It doesn't stop with one video. It will go through a number of iterations next year, and we will take this campaign out into schools, colleges, into community settings, and we'll have that conversation. We want Greater Manchester to be a place where girls and young women can grow up without looking over their shoulder, without feeling uncomfortable on a daily basis, without going home at night and replaying some of the things that people said to them. And that's what we mean where we say we want this to be a great place to grow up, get on and grow old. So this is long overdue in many ways. And I'm glad that we've got to a point today, Bev, when the board has met for the first time, that we've brought forward this video as a starting point in this conversation. And hopefully it will now appear so that our colleagues in the media can get the sense of it for the first time, and obviously then ask any questions on it. Here we go.
Oi, look at her. Very nice! Yeah, she's alright.
Yeah, no worries. See you soon. Bye.
Watch it. Hey, beautiful. Gives a smile. Don't you look much prettier when you smile? Aye, don't ignore me. Come on, love. Think you're better than me, yeah? You're not even that fit. So what, you're not going to invite me now?
Yeah, you're asking for it dressed like that.
Are we off tonight? She definitely wants it.
Oh, he's sexy.
Do you think this is okay?
So I'll hand back to you.
Thanks, Annie. Well, really, I just briefly want to say you've seen the video. It was received very well at the meeting today by everybody who thought it was made a powerful statement. You may ask the question, I suppose, as to why focus on things that some people may just say are kind of banter and everyday. I think we've had that line, haven't we, about banter in all sorts of ways that tries to trivialise what actually is a serious intrusion. But I think the main point is that the whole strategy is based on the premise, and I feel this really strongly, absolutely passionately, that the common thread that runs through all these different forms of violence and abuse, right from the kind of street harassment through to sexual violence and physical violence, domestic abuse, and even murder, is that some men feel that they can do what they want and say what they want to women, that power differential and inequality is used to justify a whole range of behaviours. And I think we do have to say that is not okay. And starting with those kinds of experience in this campaign that will be so common to so many women and girls, we hope we'll start that conversation with men starting to understand and men standing alongside us and saying, no, it's not okay. Okay, thanks, Andy.
Thanks, Bev. I'll go to colleagues in the media. Now, if any colleagues in the media do have a question they'd like to ask the Mayor, the Deputy Mayor on the campaign, if you could raise your hands, I'll just give people a couple of minutes to do that. Go to Joseph at the MEN. Joseph, you should be able to put your camera and mic on now. If you just say who you are, where you're from, and what your question is.
Yeah, hi, I'm Joseph Timon from the MEN. So my question is, obviously this campaign is about, changing public attitudes and culture. Part of your job as mayor and as deputy mayor is also obviously to monitor police performance in relation to domestic violence. We understand that at the moment there are about 200 outstanding suspects in Greater Manchester wanted for domestic violence related incidents, and that number is apparently rising. Do you think that's good enough, and how would you characterise GMP's performance on domestic abuse currently compared to where it was when the HMIC came back in September? And just to remind you what they said at that point, on specifically on grade 2 incidents, which involves vulnerable people, which includes domestic violence. The report said the force attends under a third of incidents that should be responded to within an hour. Some victims wait for several days, in some cases over a week. And in most cases, the force doesn't contact the victim to explain that there is a delay. So the question is, sort of, what does police performance relating to domestic violence and abuse look like now?
Do you want me to start with that, Andy, or do you want to start?
I will, yes, if you don't mind, Bev. I'll just to say, Joseph, that's why I said we need to change policing, and we've spent a year since the original HMIC report changing policing in Greater Manchester and asking for much better for victims of crime. And I think Bev will now be able to show you that things are improving, probably not where they need to be yet, but absolutely there has been a significant change over the last 12 months.
Thanks, Joseph. I think that's a really fair question. And I just agree with what Andy's just said. The picture is improving. It's nowhere near where it needs to be, both in terms of the attendance of officers within the timescales, but also in terms of the professional practice, or rather lack of it, of some police officers when they do attend. I've watched some body-worn videos. You might say it's surprising that a police officer knows the camera's on, but even when you see the footage, you can see that it's not satisfactory the way that some people are being talked to. This is top of the agenda now in terms of the police performance on domestic abuse and rape and serious sexual offences. Last Friday, I attended a whole day meeting at police offices chaired by the Deputy Chief Constable, that included all the district commanders and specialists with responsibilities in this area. And we went through everything with a fine-tooth comb in terms of where the issues still are. And there's a plan in place to deal with those. It will take some time because, you know, as some of the issues raised in the inspector's report around not recording crime, for instance, that has improved dramatically. But, you know, 96% of things that should be recorded are now being recorded. But what it means is that officers are having more and more issues to deal with that. And until it works through the system, we won't get the headroom to address some of these issues. But the plan is there to do that. There's a forensic examination all the time on how the performance levels are changing, and we will continue doing that until we get to a position where we're satisfied that we're providing an excellent service to all of those victims across all of the dimensions you mentioned, including keeping contact with people. That is really so important. Thanks.
Thanks, Bev. I'll go to Katie. Katie, you should be able to turn your mic and camera on now. If you just say who you are, where you're from, and what your question is and who it's directed at. So you should be able to unmute yourself now, Katie. I think Katie might be having an issue. So in the meantime, I'm going to go to Kevin Fitzpatrick. Katie, we'll come back to you after Kevin's question. Kevin, you should be able to open your mic now. Hopefully that's working now, Kevin. Just say who you are, where you're from, and what your question is.
Hi, it's Kevin Fitzpatrick, BBC Radio Manchester. It's a very powerful video, and like as a fella, you've never felt that, have you? You watching it, it certainly makes you think, right, that's a perspective I've never had. I just wonder what the plan is for actually getting it out to the right people and to connect with it, because you guys and us pushing it on social media wouldn't necessarily get it into the schools or the colleges. So what is the plan? I mean, it may be further down in the strategy, but what is the plan to actually engage with younger lads to get them to think about these things rather than it just be out there in the ether? You've made a nice video, but how do you ensure it gets to the right people?
Yeah, it's a very fair question, Kevin. This is just giving people a taster, really, of the campaign that is to come in 2022. But very much it will be, my responsibility, and I've said I'm going to lead this personally, to take it into schools and colleges and have that discussion. And I'll be looking for, perhaps some other role models, let's say, to come with me and to be brave enough, if you like, to engage that conversation at that level, because it probably means everybody, as you said, reflecting, thinking about things, and changing things. So I'll very much be wanting to develop the theme, if you like, in other videos, other materials, but it will be the conversation starter that we take into schools, colleges, and other community settings. So I've said today to the board that we want them to have oversight of the campaign as it develops. The point has already been made that it might need different treatments, if you like, to but to get through to different communities and pick up the range of issues that apply at different ages or to different communities. But that's what we intend to do. We intend to take this far and wide, and obviously we'll be looking for the help of colleagues in the media in that. I meant what I said before. I think we do need to make 2021 a watershed in the public debate about violence, abuse aimed at women and girls. It's a fact that you have older men, wolf whistling at younger women, and really causing sort of anxiety and distress. Where perhaps they know they are causing it. I don't know. And the whole point of the campaign is to make people think about that before they indulge in what kind of has been behaviour that has just been around, but we've kind of never really challenged it before. So that's the plan, Kevin, and it's obviously going to be a big personal focus for me come the new year.
Thanks, Andy. I don't know if Bev wanted to add anything on Kevin's question. Oh, I'm going to go to Katie and see if Katie's able to unmute her mic and ask the question at this stage. Katie, I'll give you a wee second just to see if that's working. I'll turn it on and off again, and maybe that might help. Any luck at that point, Katie? Given I think Katie's having some technical issues, I'm going to go to Owen. Owen, you should be able to turn your microphone on now if you just say who you are, where you're from, and what your question is.
Thanks, Ross. It's Owen from Hits Radio Manchester. two questions for you, Andy. First of which, obviously, you've made the point that you want to be at the forefront of this campaign, and and to build on Kevin's point, it's difficult for us as men sometimes, I think, to really properly grasp, how it feels for women to be in this situation. So, have you sought lots of advice from your own family members, whether it's your daughter or your wife? Have they seen the video? How involved are your conversations with them, really, to make sure that your perspective on things is as clear as it can be? And then secondly, if you don't mind, just while we've got just a quick one on COVID, just because you tweeted about it before, what would your advice to the government be now in terms of businesses in Greater Manchester who might be struggling with the advice to keep calm over Christmas?
Thanks, Owen. So firstly, no, my daughters nor my wife have seen the campaign, but we have had cause to have conversations this year that we haven't had before, or maybe I've asked questions that I haven't asked before. So I'm open to saying that, and that experience actually of hearing what my daughter said to me has changed my thinking. So I'll be honest, and I'm thinking more about these things. So I'm not sitting here saying I know it all and here's me lecturing everybody. It's not that at all. I'm not saying that. What I am saying is I think we all need to be prepared together to reflect a bit on this. Kevin was kind enough to say it is powerful, and I think it is, because I think often something will happen and blokes will go past people in the street, but what you don't see is the effect on the individual as that person walks on, and I think this is what that's designed to do. So it's definitely been, it's been informed by the conversations that I've been having this year, and I do know that this kind of what people might consider just everyday interactions, or harmless, maybe some would say, can actually cause distress and anxiety, and that's the conversation that we've got to have. I'll just say before I go to the COVID point, Owen, I'm just going to add a couple of points. That please don't think that the video is the be all and end all, and we think this solves it. I attended this week with Sasha Lord, our nighttime economy advisor, the first meeting of the anti-spiking partnership that we've set up in Greater Manchester. This is where we're working with a number of venues, Greater Manchester Police, to do a range of things to support people who feel they may have been victims of spiking or worse on a night out, particularly the provision of testing on the spot so people can find out instantly whether they have been a victim. So we're doing other things as well. And I should have perhaps mentioned at the start that we've also had a notification this morning of the government settlement for Greater Manchester Police, which, alongside whatever decision we make on the precept, probably will mean there's a reasonable uplift coming next year for Greater Manchester Police. And of course, back to Joseph's question from the MEN earlier, this is partly about having the police officers in place to deal with those crimes that Bev is saying are now being more accurately recorded, and all of that is part of this. But yeah, the video has been informed by conversations I've had this year that, being honest, I've not had before, and that own reflection from myself means that I'm being honest enough in saying that I've probably not thought as much as I should have done about these things over the years. I guess that goes for a lot of men and boys in Greater Manchester. So shouldn't we collectively say, right, hands up, we need to do something here? And as I said, there's been a sort of public narrative about women should do this or women should do the other, and it's the wrong starting point. It's got to be about us first, because the problem is coming from us. It's one, we've got to own this and say, right, what are we doing here? Something needs to change, and that's what the video is all about. Not lecturing, just saying, right, is this okay? I think most right-minded people will say no. Right, change is needed. Come on then, what's that change that we're going to bring about? On the second part of your question, Owen, obviously there's a developing situation with regard to Omicron. My point this morning was that you cannot have the Prime Minister and Chief Medical Officer saying to people that they should think carefully before going to a pub or restaurant, and in effect saying minimise socialising, and then not provide any help to businesses who will be affected by those statements, particularly at this time of year, which is the time of year that many in hospitality will use to make sure they can pay the bills in January, February and March. And bear in mind, we know in Greater Manchester last year they didn't have that that festive period then, and so this is a real hammer blow. And it's not just hospitality; it's the taxi trade that will suffer. Events, live events, conferences, they're suffering. Live music, other performance, they will be suffering. So it's about all businesses that are experiencing impact. And I want to make something really plain in answer to your question. Although we hear a lot of talk of support for businesses in the media, and that is right, we must not forget individuals, and there also needs to be individual support, because there are people who work in our pubs and our bars and our restaurants who were relying on this period to top up their income through the holiday period, who now will not be getting the hours to work that they thought they were, who may have even been sent home or even laid off. And there has to be a support scheme for those individuals too, whose wages will have taken a big hit as a result of statements made by senior members of the government. So I'm not saying those statements are wrong. What I am saying is you cannot make them without also recognising the impact of your words. Obviously, that they're designed to have an impact and to stop people going out. Well, it's not fair then not to follow up with the support for individuals and businesses that is needed as a result of those statements. So that's what I've said today, Owen. I think it's a call that many others have repeated, and we're calling on the Prime Minister and the Chancellor to get round the table and sort out a support package for individuals and businesses, particularly those that have been impacted by recent statements.
Thanks, Andy. I've got the final question, which Katie, who's had technical issues, has texted in. So it's Katie Hazeltine from That's TV. Bev mentioned how some of these actions featured in the video can often be passed off as banter or a joke. Given that there is a focus here on attitudes and culture, how will the success of this campaign be measured in the long term?
Bev, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. Again, that is a really good question, Katie, and it's not actually just how we'll measure the impact of the public engagement campaign and this particular element around men and boys. We have to develop the ways in which we'll evaluate the other aspects of the strategy and the impact we hope that they will have. That is work in progress. I think for the moment, the initial impact we want this particular campaign to have is that people will engage with it, will start talking about it in all sorts of media and forums, and that it generates a kind of discourse, if you like, across Greater Manchester that shows that people are taking this seriously. We'll then have to see if we can further down the line see if this has actually had a positive impact in terms of the behaviour women and girls are experiencing. And actually we have lots of ways of doing that we use routinely. Our comms team and those around them do lots of work talking to focus groups. We had a lot of conversations with different groups of people, including men and boys, in order to produce the video, getting their reactions to it. And so on, and we'll continue to do that. We'll do survey work, which again is routine for the combined authority across a whole range of fronts. So we will try and get some measurements, both of the level of engagement there is with this campaign, and then the effects of it in terms of what people think about it and whether they feel there's a change of behaviour. But we are very focused on the evaluation, because it's not, a soft, touchy-feely thing we're doing here. We're actually trying to change behaviour and
Thanks, Bev. That's all the questions for today, and we're a little bit over time. I don't know if you or Andy had any final reflections.
I'm only going to finish, Ross, by thanking everybody for coming. Apologies for the late start, and thanks in advance if you're able to put the video out on your channels, and anything you can do to stimulate that public conversation that Bev was just talking about. So I know this will be of interest to your readers, your viewers. It's an overdue conversation, as I said earlier. And one in which none of us are able, we're not preaching here. We're just saying we need to talk about all of these things, and we hope you'll get that going with us. So just a thanks from me, Tom, and just to wish all colleagues in the media, if we don't see you again, from Bev and I, and from all of the comms team, a really good break, happy Christmas, and hopefully a better New Year.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
Happy Christmas.
Thanks, Andy.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.